This is from January 4th, 1983, another reading from EIR, Executive Intelligence Review. And how I got started reading from this journal, which is really extraordinary, is I was doing research into the black nobility, and I read... I found some postings online from someone named Israel Zeus, and then he changed his name to something else. He was writing anonymously, but he seemed to have a lot of inside information that could be verified. And then I read Dr. John Coleman's book, Committee of 300, and some more clues in there. And then I saw a criticism of Coleman, which I still don't subscribe to, but that he they said, he plagiarized all of his stuff on the black nobility from EIR, and I thought, EIR, usually the LaRouche organization is associated with very, very specifically with exposing the power of the British intelligence and what I would call the new British Empire, and the role of the British East India Company and the British Empire in shaping the world, and its pernicious role in through its agents in the United States. So at any rate, I had no idea. So I thought, I still see tremendous value in Dr. Coleman. I thought, oh wow, there's black nobility information in in EIR. Let me see what I can find. And I went back to this very interesting time period, late 70s, early 80s, and looking for clues as to why we are where we are, and looking for clues as to fractures or schisms in the power structure, because it's very difficult to see any now. So, and I found this article by Webster Tarpley, and it's really quite extraordinary. Webster Tarpley kind of dropped off the map back in 2016. I think he went on this sort of bizarre attack against Trump's wife, which I thought, what is the point of this? And it was over the top, and I wondered, he seemed to be self-sabotaging by doing such a pointless thing. And but I have to acknowledge that I have a lot of respect for Webster Tarpley, and I've gotten a lot out of his work. And I found this article which actually really does expose some of the schisms, some of the cracks that perhaps still exist. I don't know, but so talking about first of all, it went from my sense from my other research that the black nobility and the nobility that was associated with the Holy Roman Empire are still in power, still wield a lot of power and control over the world. A lot of it is covert, but then I found a sort of trove of articles written in this time period that confirm this. So I'm going to read part of this article at any rate, not the whole thing. The oligarchs plan to control the new governments of Europe, by Webster Tarpley in Wiesbaden. The end of 1982 leaves the continent of Europe in the lengthening shadows of the most sinister crisis since the Second World War, a crisis whose portent shakes the foundations of European civilization. From every point of view, it is 5 minutes to midnight for this old continent. And I thought that was a little bit over the top. I thought it was a bit melodramatic. But, looking at what we're seeing today, my God, it's only been really 40 years, which is not long at all for things to have gotten from what we're seeing from Dr. Tarpley's assertion here to where we are today. 40 years is about right. So, going on, the present threat to Europe emerges from three primary sources. First are the indigenous continental families of the European oligarchy of the Habsburgs, Tournontaxis, Hohenzollern, Savoy, Pallavicini, and Orléans ilk, who are celebrating the failure of the modern nation-state in Europe, engineering the failure, and who are busily preparing various versions of a return to the Holy Roman Empire of feudal fiefdoms, bucolic depopulation, and abolition of urban life. The families involved agree broadly on the Holy Roman Empire program, but lock into violent contention on the secondary question of just which dynasty should be in command. The unprecedented activism of oligarchic family circles has been signaled by renewed monarchical ferment in favor of the former ruling houses of Austria, Prussia, Italy, France, Portugal, Albania, Romania, with Egypt and some others not far behind. In addition, the patent bankruptcy of existing governmental institutions has revivified and remoralized the oligarchy-centered currents of what was dubbed in the early 1930s universal fascism, the old synergist networks, free of accommodation to national considerations, exemplified by the Italian fascists who rallied around Mussolini in his 1944 Republic of Salo, the Nazi puppet state created in northern Italy, or by the European SS divisions who provided Hitler with his last Praetorian Guard in the ruins of Berlin in April 1945. January 1983 will mark the 50th anniversary of Hitler's seizure of power in Germany, and the occasion has already proven a heady tonic to such Nazis and neo-Nazis as the former Algerian dictator Ben Bella, his friend François Genot, and the German fascist writer Ernst Jünger, who was awarded the prestigious Goethe Literary Prize several months ago. In Italy, Mussolini's offspring, Countess Edda Ciano and Vittorio Mussolini, have been interviewed in the mass media about their father's love of family life, and even Italian Communist Party mayors in Emilia-Romagna are preparing to celebrate the centennial of the birth of Il Duce in his hometown, Predappio. These developments had been prepared earlier in the year by a Milan exhibition on the fascist era entitled The 30s, a basic theme of which was that people were better off under fascism. In this overall climate, the regional liberation movements the Nazi occupation sponsored throughout the continent are augmenting their activity, from the Jurassic Liberation Front in Switzerland to a movement called Venezia Libera, which is drilling with bombs and machine guns in their Venetian lagoon in preparation for erecting an independent entity with Count Volpi di Misurata as the new Doge. When I first read this, I was surprised that he's still alive at the writing of this article. I know a little about him. The second forces now lacerating European society are the British oligarchy and the British secret services, who have not deviated from Lord Carrington's basic orientation of ejecting U.S. troops and influence from the continent and establishing a third force alongside the two existing superpowers grouped around the British strategic nuclear forces and fleet and under British political and diplomatic domination. Further down the road lurks the British imperial yoke for Europe, an idea which has caught the imagination of some of the malcontents among the continental oligarchy. The British provided a convincing demonstration of their power over Europe in April, May, and June of this year, when they successfully exacted full European community's support, complete with economic sanctions for their colonial adventure against Argentina in the Malvinas, in particular when François Mitterrand joined Helmut Schmidt at the latter's bungalow in a Hamburg suburb in May to declare their fealty to Margaret Thatcher's atavistic dreams of empire. The entire edifice of European war avoidance strategy, laboriously assembled since 1976 by forces around the Paul VI, Moro and Andreotti combination in Italy, Giscard in France, and Schmidt in West Germany, came crashing down, leaving Europe the passive object of British strategic machinations and realpolitik. Schmidt was, in effect, willing to sign his own political death warrant in order to obey the orders coming from London. By knuckling under, he became useless to all parties, and his departure became a foregone conclusion. As a result of this process, the strategy of NATO out of area military adventurism and aggression became an established fact for all of Western Europe, and the refusal of the Italians and Irish to prolong the British-imposed economic sanctions against Argentina did not change this picture, although they were a rearguard struggle in which the European Labour Party played a distinguished role. The third decisive factor is the emergence of an offensive of the Soviet KGB against Western Europe, which had reached its full development with the advent of Yuri Andropov and his associates in the Kremlin. Until recently, the prevalent face of Soviet policy toward Europe was that of Brezhnev, whom an eminent Vatican diplomat once privately praised as a man of peace, at heart a conservative, most prudent and cautious, fatherly and predictable. This was Brezhnev, the partner of Schmidt and Giscard, the Brezhnev who had moved the West German population with the cultural and historical optimism of the television speech he delivered on the occasion of his Bonn visit in 1978. Andropov incarnates the other, darker side of Russian history, the world of Raskolniki, the old believers, the dissident current on the edges of the Russian Orthodox Church, tortured, mystical, messianic, irrational, racialist. One of the factional issues between Brezhnev and Chernenko on the one hand, and the Andropov KGB group on the other, has been the advisability of attempting to decouple Western Europe from the United States and of attempting to submit this continent to Russian influence. Brezhnev and Chernenko are reliably reported to have rejected this perspective as the most likely formula for World War III, which is a realistic assessment of the behavior of a future fortress America in the wake of such a development. Andropov, on the other hand, is committed to a decoupling of Western Europe from Washington and is manifestly now moving in this direction, attempting to overcome the resistance of his domestic factional adversaries as he proceeds. Although the ultimate goal of these three groupings are not compatible, their immediate program of action, especially in regard to the liquidation of U.S. influence and the rollback of industrial society, converge sufficiently in the short to medium run to make them natural allies. And isn't this what we see today? The collaboration of Lord Carrington and Andropov and of their secret services SIS and KGB, mediated through British triple agent Kim Philby, now a KGB general, has become an international scandal of the first rank. Political analysts have further pointed to Henry Kissinger and Andropov as parallel lives in Plutarch's sense, with a long pattern of symbiosis in their careers. The continental oligarchs, including the Swiss and Belgians, are in constant association with the British and the Russians to enhance their dynastic chances in the expected pattern of monarchical restorations. Independent Europe and Fanfani. The order of battle of these forces for 1983 can be established already. They are determined to make this coming year a kind of super 1968, marked by chaotic mass upsurges of the Greenies and peace movement around the issue of the installation of the Pershing cruise Euromissiles, which is scheduled for the end of the year, 4 years after the original decision of December 1979. That decision, it should be remembered, was prepared by Kissinger's September 1979 announcement that the U.S. nuclear umbrella over Western Europe was a thing of the past. With the planned deployment by Moscow of orbital relativistic beam weapons systems, the Pershings are obsolete even before they go into production, to say nothing of the cruise missiles, which have scant hopes of penetrating the already revamped Soviet air defenses. And so my question is, what happened to these beam weapons systems? Do they exist? Why is nobody discussing them? But although their war-winning potential is nil, the Euromissiles have been a godsend to the enemies of Schmidt and have also contributed to the ascendancy of the Andropov group. Now, in 1983, the potential of the Euromissiles to provide this unifying issue for a continent-wide anti-American upsurge, violently hostile to nuclear energy and to modern industry in general, will be revealed. These new fascist vandals are now on the march. A typical figure for the projected Carrington-Andropov independent Europe of 1983 is none other than the new Italian Prime Minister Amintore Fanfani. Nothing could be more foolish than to try to map him on a linear political spectrum as a right-winger. True, Fanfani was a professor of fascist mysticism under Mussolini, has written on fascist geopolitics and fascist corporativist economics, but he was also the expediter of the, quote, opening to the left by the Italian Christian Democrats in the early 1960s, when he headed up the first center-left government of the post-war period. Fanfani, together with his now-deceased associate Giorgio Lapira, the social Catholic mayor of Florence, was present at the creation of the worldwide anti-Vietnam War ferment when Lapira undertook a global mediating mission. Perhaps the only accurate label for the diminutive Fanfani is that of a third-order Franciscan friar, a secular member of the religious order whose recent charter of Gubbio has made every Franciscan into a militant preacher of the Malthusian genocide gospel of the Club of Rome and Aurelio Peccei. Fanfani's elevation to the prime ministership is a direct affront to the United States. The man he replaced, former Prime Minister Giovanni Spadolini, had worked closely with U.S. officials to save the life of U.S. General James Dozier, kidnapped by terrorists a year ago. Spadolini had been won over to the war on drugs perspective, favored by the most intelligent and patriotic components of the Reagan administration and had visited the United States during the waning days of his government to seal an accord with Reagan to wage war on the drug mafia through a U.S.-Italian alliance. Hours after his return from the United States to Rome, Spadolini was ousted from power. One of those who helped overthrow him, Senator Cesare Maragorza of the Assicurazioni Generali di Venezia insurance giant, cynically remarked that Italy does not need a prime minister who makes such frequent journeys to Washington. In other words, Spadolini had to go because the Anglo-Soviet Entente would not tolerate pro-American heads of government in Europe. Persistent rumors circulating in Rome indicate that Fanfani may have secured the benevolent opposition of the Italian Communist Party, PCI, to his government by a promise to repudiate the Euromissile's installation sometime next year, bowing to the mass pressure of the peace marches the PCI is actively organizing. In Italy, the peace movement is inseparable from the Sicilian, Sardinian, and other regional separatist movements, which are in turn transmogrifications of the mafia, the 'ndrangheta, the Camorra, and other drug rings. In Italy, just as in West Germany, the funding for the Greenpeace movement often comes from Libya's outlaw dictator Gaddafi or from the nearest Bulgarian diplomatic mission. Allusions to it's very much in vogue now to praise Gaddafi and to lament his fate, and for some very good reasons. But so let's not just assume everything's black and white. There's more to the man. There's layers here that I'm not familiar with, but I'm not interested in making judgment one way or the other. Just looking at the layers as we come across them. And then the Bulgarian connection was that network, if you will, drugs and interlinked drugs and weapon trafficking, that this network was implicated in the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II in 1981, I think. And the international press was mocking, deriding the efforts of an Italian prosecutor or an Italian investigator who was trying to alert people to the reality of the Bulgarian connection. So that's what's being alluded to here. The present scale of KGB Bulgarian involvement in the peace movement, in the KGB and MI6, everyone sort of the if you want to call it a black market, intersecting in Bulgaria, the Soviets and the British, everyone tied in there. The Bulgarian connection. Let's see. The present scale of KGB Bulgarian involvement in the peace movement of these and other countries would be inconceivable without the revenues derived by the KGB from the drug trade, in which its involvement rivals that of British and Chinese secret services. That's very interesting to me. On the day Fanfani received the confidence of the Parliament in Rome, PSI Defense Minister Lelio Lagorio announced that NATO was no longer sufficient to guarantee Italian defense, but that something more had to be provided. Just what this might be was indicated more clearly by PSI Deputy Falco Accame, a leader of the Italian peace movement, who called for the European Defence Force with headquarters in London. Accame's colleagues in the leadership of the Italian peace movement like former NATO General Nino Pasti and PCI extremist leader Giancarlo Pagetta, are a representative sample of the KGB SIS Philbyite types who are now gearing up for the new year of struggle. Their base is cosmopolitan. At a recent peace gathering in Milan, the ego ideal offered to the young protesters by a Freudian psychologist was none other than Benito Mussolini. The Magistrates' War on Terror. Given the constellation of forces backing Fanfani, that Italy would be certain to cease to exist as a country, were it not for the gallant struggle of the only residual Republican elite left on the continent, the country's magistrates. Although the voluminous discoveries of their investigations have gone criminally unreported in the Anglo-American cultural ghetto, that refers back to my earlier comment about the Bulgarian connection, but also P2, I think, which is still considered off limits when it comes to involvement of figures like Alexander Haig and Henry Kissinger, for instance. These fighting judges have unearthed more evidence of the oligarchical conspiracy behind terrorism, dirty finance, drugs, kidnapping, and media manipulation of institutionalized evil than any other force in this country. The judges, who are generally in their 40s, see themselves as the heirs to Judge Vittorio Occorsio, killed in Rome in 1976 by the terrorist bandit Concutelli, and of Judge Emilio Alessandrini of Milan, slain by terrorists in January 1979. Most are assiduous readers of the publications of the Partito Operaio Europeo, European Labour Party, on terrorism and related questions, which more than one of them has privately pointed to as providing a precious overview in which highly specialized and specific leads and discoveries can be situated. Judge Imposimato of Rome earlier this year made headlines by publicly denouncing the Israeli Mossad's role in steering the Red Brigades. He has been interrogating UIL trade unionist Luigi Scricciolo, a terrorist who has confessed to being a Bulgarian agent. Most recently, Imposimato has issued arrest warrants for PSI Mafia members of Parliament Giacomo Mancini and Antonio Landolfo of the Calabrese Ndrangheta, warrants which have not yet been served because the two gangsters involved continue to enjoy parliamentary immunity. Judge Calogero of Padua is preparing to bring Red Brigade's ideologue Tony Negri to trial early next year, along with co-conspirator Oreste Scalzone. If the latter can be extradited from France. Judge Marchetti has been rounding up Sardinian terrorist separatists of the old Feltrinelli networks, who are now in the pay of certain U.S. intelligence operations. Judge Ilario Martella has been unearthing substantial portions of the international conspiracy that tried to kill the Pope in May 1981. Judge Ciclari is probing the British Freemasons behind the murder last June of Roberto Calvi of the P2 and the Banco Ambrosiano. Judge Gentile of Bologna, probing the September 1980 bombing massacre at the Bologna railroad station, established the existence of the Monte Carlo Lodge, where terrorist Stefano delle Chiaie rubs elbows with Henry Kissinger. Judge Carlo Palermo of Trento has brought to light the immense Turkish, Bulgarian, Italian, NATO, KGB drug and weapons smuggling operations around Henri Arsan and has jailed 200 members of this ring. Judge Dell'Osso of Milan, the man who shut down the Ceresto drug refinery, is continuing his assault on the drug mafia from the other flanks. Judge Acquiesci of Milan is investigating the allegations made by Fiorella Operto of the POE in a legal brief submitted on the role of Henry Kissinger in the 1978 kidnapped slaying of Aldo Moro by the Red Brigades. Judge Falcone is presently investigating the September murder of Carabinieri General Carlo Alberto dalla Chiesa, one of the most distinguished veterans of the anti-terror fight, who was gunned down in Sicily because of his knowledge of the British sponsorship of the Sicilian mafia. As his personal papers and the testimony of a colleague revealed later, these judges are joined by effective police officers like Commissioner Di Francisci, Francischi, I don't know how to pronounce that. I need to work on my Italian. Of the Digos, D-I-G-O-S, Francisci, who ran the war room operations that located and freed General Dozier and intelligence men like General Lugaresi, the head of SIMSI, SIMSI, the military intelligence unit. These magistrates are one of the most significant forces fighting for the cause of civilization. Then it goes into West Germany after Schmidt. And I think I'm going to take a break here. There's a lot in this. It gets very specific about. I'll just read this quote to summarize. The present threat to Europe emerges from three primary sources: the continental monarchists' drive to restore a Holy Roman Empire of feudal fiefdoms and bucolic depopulation, British plans to make Europe a strategic third force against the United States, and the replacement of Brezhnev's détente policy with Andropov's policy of rolling back Europe's industrial societies into Jacobin darkness. The question of averting these dangers is fundamentally a question of culture. And I think that's where we'll stop. And the last part of this article is quite nice, which elaborates a little bit on the opposing viewpoint, the epistemological, philosophical strain that flows through the Italian Renaissance up through the American Revolution and into the present, and the writer would argue flows directly into and informs the LaRouche organizations. The Club of Life, what happened to the Club of Life, it says here. European Labour Party and Anti-Drug Coalition, Fusion Energy Foundation, the Humanist Academy, and others. And it says here, have played the role of a truly great power, the only serious opposition to the Venetian would-be rulers of the Zeitgeist at the Chini Foundation, which is supposedly the most powerful think tank in the world, and the Société Européenne du Culture. The traditions founded at the Mannheim Conference on Friedrich Schiller in November 1980 and the Dante Conference of December 1981 in Rome have been honored and amplified. The founding meetings of the Club of Life in Rome, Paris, and Wiesbaden in October of this year were, in addition to being events of great political impact, cultural events of the greatest magnitude in the struggle to free men's minds from historical and cultural pessimism which have proliferated unchecked in Europe. Faith in science and reason have been fostered above all by the ICLC campaign for electron beam space platforms. Again, bringing this up. A campaign flanked by EIR seminars in various national capitals. More than 1,200 Milan high school students, teachers, and concerned citizens attended the Humanist Academies Conference on the occasion of the 500th anniversary of the arrival of Leonardo da Vinci in Milan, giving rise to a series of press polemics which have not subsided, but which have provoked the intervention of the KGB's leading thug, Georgy Arbatov. A European Nuclear Committee, an institution without precedent, was inaugurated at Strasbourg in December, and the new organism will join hands with the Club of Life in sponsoring large-scale conferences on the New World Economic Order and the Non-Aligned Conference in Paris and other European capitals on February 19th to 20th. The anti-drug coalition, in addition to the impulse imparted to the war on drugs in Italy and other countries, was instrumental in getting the Rolling Stones kicked out of Florence and condemned as pagan by the Cardinal of Naples. The Culture of Life also mobilized to help rescue Nusrat Bhutto, leader of the outlawed Pakistan People's Party, from detention by the brutal Zia regime in Pakistan. In all these activities, the LaRouche organizations have kept the spark of humanist culture alive in the gathering darkness of present-day Europe. And so my question is, I really feel that LaRouche is no longer over the organization, perhaps since his death, is no longer over the target and seems to be politically tone-deaf, shall we just say that, and that it's up to all of us to excavate and to delve into the sources of true humanism. Nicholas of Cusa, Dante Alighieri, Machiavelli, the founding fathers, and today represented. It's hard to say where it is accumulating, where it's building up any kind of focused political potential. I'm not seeing it. Perhaps it's among my own in my own circle, in the circles of others who see progress and development and the cultivation of human potential as being the source of what is meaningful and what is beautiful. It's happening perhaps all around us. So, anyway.